But confidence, I've discovered, is really much like anything. It's not something that you feel and then do. It is something that you do and then feel.
Welcome to The Portfolio Life with Jeff Goins. This is the podcast that helps you to pursue work that matters, make a difference with your art, and discover your true voice. I'm your host, Jared Easley. This is the fourth Q&A episode. Jeff answers questions from listeners that were posted on the Goins Writer Facebook page. But first, this episode is brought to you by Jeff's book, Wrecked. Wrecked is a book about the life we're afraid to live, one full of radical sacrifice and selfless service. It's a look at how we discover fulfillment in the least likely of places. Please consider picking up your copy of Wrecked by going to goinswriter.com/wrecked. And now, Jeff Goins.
Jeff, our question today is from Tina Green Drake. And this is about writing, but it's specifically about writing articles. And one of her questions is, what are some ideas on cultivating usable writing ideas?
Well, I love the word curating because I think that's what a good writer does. A good writer doesn't just come up with, a bunch of his or her own original ideas. A good writer is a curator, and I think that word is most popular, in like museums, right? You think of a curator. A curator doesn't actually create the art. She just decides where on the walls it should go and when we should bring out these pieces and when we should not. And I think, I think a writer is an artist and does create work, but I think he also, brings together a bunch of other people's work in a way that ends up looking like something new and original. So how do I curate, and how should you curate? I think is a good question. And I would say, use whatever system works for you. I think everybody is different. Everybody has their own ways of organizing things. But I think at the basic level, in order to have a good curation process, you probably need a few basic elements. The first thing that you need is a system. And I mean that, just in a really non-technical way. A system is something that you do repeatedly with, a certain consistent result. And so a process is, hey, every day I get up and I brush my teeth and I don't have cavities. That's a process. I don't brush my teeth every 3 days, and hope for those results. I brush my teeth every day and, for the most part, don't have cavities. So that's a process, or a system rather. And so you want to figure out the system that works for you. So the first thing you need is some sort of system. And what I do is anytime I come across an idea, I try to capture it immediately. And I do that throughout the day. I will pull one of those ideas and turn it into an article or a guest post or something. Or I say, well, not right now. This is a good idea, but I don't know what I'm going to do with this. And I just kind of stick it into a little research folder, or I discard it. I go, hey, this seemed interesting at the time, but I don't really know what I was thinking about. And I throw it away. And, some people think that that's, crazy, like never throw away an idea. But if I just know that it's not going to benefit me and it's just going to contribute to clutter, which is going to lead to greater procrastination, I discard it. And if I'm not sure, like I said, I just throw it into that research folder, which I may revisit for, when I write a book or something, or work on getting stuck writing an article for my blog and I need a little bit of inspiration. So that's essentially my system. Now, in order to make the system work, you need to have the right tools. And again, you need to find the tools that work for you. For me, a great tool, a free tool, is Evernote. And Evernote is just this note-taking productivity app that allows you to capture content in a lot of different formats, and then it compiles it and makes it accessible through any device you have, your computer, your laptop, your iPad, your phone. You can access it at any time from any place. And compiles that information, and it makes it searchable, and you can tag it and create different notebooks and organize it. And I find this particularly useful, not necessarily to create a bunch of content, but to compile other people's content or ideas that I have And then when it's time to create, when it's time to write, I then use this tool, to basically provide the research content, the ideas, the inspiration that I need to sit down and create. So I'm not actually creating out of nothing. I've got some sort of basic material from which I can kind of edit and develop into, hopefully a better idea. And so, that's basically it. I've got a system and, that I use with expected results, and then those are pretty consistent. And then I've got a tool that's easy for me to use that makes it work. And one thing that I would say, might be an optional third part of this process is to have some sort of feedback channel. So you've got a system, you've got a tool, and then you've got some sort of feedback. So it's one thing to curate a bunch of ideas and just share them and think that they're great. It's another thing to have a way for people to tell you, I didn't like that idea so much, or I didn't think that was really that good, or you could have done a better job with that. And feedback for me happens in two different levels. One, it happens at a real personal, private level where I am going to my wife or going to a few friends. I have a few friends whose opinion I trust in different areas. Some more artistic friends, some more entrepreneurial friends. And when I'm about to put something out there, a piece of content, write something, or share a bunch of ideas that I've curated, I want to make sure it's going to resonate. And so I test it initially with these friends if I'm not sure. And they give me feedback, and they'll tell me no, yes, or you need to tweak this. And then the second level of feedback is kind of public feedback. So I have a blog, and I've put stuff out there, and people sometimes tell me they don't like it or that they love it. And that's helpful too for creating future work. And so the feedback in a way is sort of another part of the research where you put the stuff out there, you get feedback first from close friends and then from more people. And then you can take that and you can make a note of it and then apply it to future work. And I don't say that to say that we're always trying to pander to our audience or give people just what they want, but understanding what connects and how to I like understanding what's going to resonate with somebody and then kind of trying to push to the cutting edge of that so that I'm still within the fines of this is going to connect with somebody, and it's not going to be so out there that it's going to be irrelevant, but at the same time it's not going to be so expected that it's boring. And so having those feedback loops allows me to create work that is informed. And if I am going to do something that's really out there, I know it's out there. I'm not going, oh, this is totally going to resonate, and then I put it out there, and people go, oh, this did not connect with me. If I'm going to take a risk, I know because of that feedback loop. So again, a system, tools, and some sort of feedback loop, I think are probably the three ways to capture, curate, and then create.
Jeff, you mentioned the feedback loop. What are some ways that article writers can verify what they believe is an interesting topic?
Well, I love that word resonance. We say, does it resonate? And that's a musical term. I mean, what that really means is if I had a tuning fork or an instrument and I hit a C note, there are certain objects that have that same resonant frequency. And you think about, like those cartoons where you had opera ladies singing really high and they would shatter windows. They weren't shattering those windows because they were singing too high or too loud. They were shattering those windows because that particular tone was resonating, and it was resonating. So, I mean, if you've ever studied like wavelengths and stuff, you understand that higher frequency tones, they vibrate faster, and lower vibrate, slower, and that's why they make those higher and lower sounds. So when the resonant frequency is so high and it's so intense and it hits that object and it has that same frequency, that object vibrates too, and if it vibrates fast enough, it's going to break. So I think the same thing is true when you create content. You're creating content and you want to write something that moves people, that resonates with them. So how do you know, if it's going to resonate? You don't really. You have to try. You have to put something out there. But this is the good news about, the world in which we live in, the technology that's available to almost anyone, is it's basically free to put something out there. It's basically free to try something, and there's very little failure. It's not like, 100 years ago, you would write a book and hope somebody read it, or even 20 years ago. And if you spent 2.5 years working on this book and nobody liked it, the publisher was out money and you were never going to get paid to write another book again. The risks are much lower and the potential reward is much higher because you can iteratively put your work out there, see what connects, and that will inform more work. And again, I say this not because we need to be placating our audiences, but all artists, I think can benefit from being informed about how their work is or is not resonating. And it doesn't mean that everything you do people are going to love or that they need to, but this is a dance. This is a relationship. You make a move, they make a move. They make a move, you make a move. And together, the artist and the audience, through that conversation, they are in fact creating something unique altogether. It's not just about you creating something and them responding to it. That exchange is essentially a creative process. And I think it can be a really fun, life-giving one. That's not to say that there aren't critics and people who will just hate what you do and you'll want to dance with them and they'll step on your toes. That's fine. When that happens, you go, I don't want to dance with that person. But there are some people, when you move, they'll move, and it will inform your next move. And it's fun, and it's exciting, and it actually makes you do better work.
Jeff, you talked about systems earlier. What are some ways that article writers can formulate and deliver articles in a timely fashion?
Well, basically what we're talking about is habits. So, how do you build any habit? Slowly over time. And I am right now in the middle of a challenge with a community of people online where we have pledged for 31 days to write 500 words a day. And I started this out because I knew that I needed to finish my current book. And I knew that if I wrote at least 500 words a day for the next 60 days, I would meet my word count. I'd already written a little bit for the book and I needed to get to 50,000 words. And so just plodding along every day, writing 500 words, I was going to do that. And so I made that commitment, and I've been following it along for the past week or so. So what happens when you do that, when you do anything like that, when you commit to some sort of goal, and it needs to be kind of a minimum goal. Some days you show up and you make the bare minimum. Like yesterday, I wrote like 590 words. So I barely made it. And that's okay. Like I go, okay, I did my work for the day, and now I'll get at it tomorrow. But then there are some days where I show up to write my 500 words and I end up writing 3,000 words because I have developed this habit and I have put my butt in the chair. And all of a sudden what feels like a very rote, boring action, something that is routine, all of a sudden I'm writing and I'm in this place and maybe I'm groggy and need my coffee and it's early in the morning, and yet something happens. I get inspired. And in this very kind of blue-collar work ethic mentality where I'm just showing up, clocking in to do my 500 words and then get out, something kind of magical happens. And this, I think, is the power of habits. We discipline ourselves to do just a little bit every day to build this habit. And then every once in a while, something incredible happens. And what I find with inspiration, is not something that you wait for it to come before you work. A lot of times, inspiration comes and finds you in the midst of your work. And like a muse or a fairy godmother or something, she comes into the midst of your work and says, hey, I want to be a part of that. And, I've made this analogy that the muse, for men, this analogy is the muse is a lady and you need to romance her. And for women, it's a little bit less savory, but I think it's, even more accurate. The muse is a bum who, is out of work and sitting on your couch, and he's not going to move until you move. He's not going to get off the couch and get to work and, start working on the chores or go get a job or whatever until you do. And so what you need to do is you need to get to work. You need to show the muse that you're serious. And for some inexplicable reason, some days he or she, will show up and will, sprinkle magic fairy dust on your work. And other times that won't happen. And that's okay too. We're not waiting for inspiration, but it's a nice byproduct when it happens. If we get up and if we do the work every day, just a little bit, two things will happen. One, we will make ourselves available to any inspiration that wants to come. And second, we will be getting better. We will be building this habit. On the days when you just barely meet your minimum, you need to feel good about that, because you weren't waiting for inspiration to come. You were doing your job. And today it was enough. And, in terms of how you develop those habits, that is really up to you. I mean, you know you better than anybody else does. And so you know what motivates you. For me, I know that I need to get up first thing in the morning and I need to write as quickly as possible. And that if I can get 500 words out, often another 500 or 1,000 words will come. But if that's all I can muster for the day, I know that that is enough to get me to where I need to go.
Jeff, Tina was also curious to know what your advice is on growing confidence and fighting fear.
Well, goodness, I would say, join the crowd in that. It's a lifelong battle for me. Something surprising that I have found about confidence is certainly that it's not the opposite of fear. You can be confident and courageous really in the midst of feeling fearful. But confidence, I've discovered, is really much like anything. It's not something that you feel and then do. It is something that you do and then feel. And I experienced this as an adult, really probably for the first time just a few years ago when my wife and I were going to a concert, a music concert here in Nashville. We went to this place called the Ryman Auditorium, which is this beautiful, historic theater that seats no more than 2,000 people. So it's a small, intimate place. There's not really a bad seat in the house. And it used to be a church. And so it's all like wooden pews. And it's where the original Grand Ole Opry would play. And they still, do shows there sometimes. And so we went to the show. And, it's intimate show. Tickets are more expensive than going to some big auditorium usually. And it's just kind of a classy place to go be entertained. And so my wife and I were at this concert, and there was this very loud group of people that were sitting behind us, and they were drinking, and they were drunk, and they were loud. And at one point, this guy spills beer on my wife's coat. And this happens a couple of times. They're being really loud. I mean, we go to concerts and, you expect a little bit of noise, but they are so loud. And it's kind of a low-key, singer-songwriter show. They are distracting. I mean, it's really making the experience not particularly enjoyable. So I go and I talk to one of the ushers and I just say, hey, can you talk to them? I mean, they're loud, they're drunk, they're spilling stuff on, our clothes. It's not really nice. And so I go to the bathroom, I come back, and the usher comes and talks to the person, and as I start walking back to our seat, my wife, leaves her seat and comes and greets me and says, "Come on, we're going." And we start walking out of the auditorium. I don't know what's going on. I go, "Okay, is everything all right?" Everything's fine. And we just start walking out of the auditorium, and then finally we're getting to the exit, and I stop in the lobby and I say, well, "Wait a second, what happened?" And she tells me that this guy, sort of berated her, yelled at her because he thought that she told the usher when I told the usher, and he basically was verbally abusive to my wife and was really rude and made her cry. And so I feel like powerless at this point because, here my wife is upset. We're leaving this concert. We've basically been bullied, out of this show. And this guy is a big, muscular, 6'2", football player looking dude. And I'm not that. And so I start walking towards the exit, and all of a sudden I feel like a little kid. I feel like I'm being bullied at the playground again. And I go, no, I've had enough of this. And so I stop, and I tell my wife, I'll be right back. I got to go take care of something. And I turn around. She goes, no. I go, it's all right, I'll be right back. And I turn around, and I walk back up to this guy in the middle of the concert. And I tap him on the shoulder, which is, several heads above me. And the whole time I am just afraid. I'm shaking, right? But I just know that there's something wrong about this, and then I'm, almost 30 years old, and this needs to not happen, to an adult. And so I tap him on the shoulder, and I yell at him, and I say, you were a jerk, and I demand an apology, and you're just a big drunk idiot. And I'm shaking, and at any moment, I'm thinking he's going to punch me in the face. He's drunk, he's unruly, who knows what's going to happen. But I just know that this is what my wife deserves, and this is what this moment requires. And so I'm yelling at him, I'm shaking my finger at him, telling him that I demand an apology. And inside, I'm so scared, and I feel like this guy's going to hit me. And all of a sudden, he turns to me, and he says, I'm sorry, man. And I'm kind of surprised, and I go, well, yeah, you better be. And, I yell at him some more, and then he apologizes again, and I walk away. And I walk away with a little bit of a swagger, I feel more confident, and my wife didn't really see any of that. And yeah, I did it for her honor, but in some ways I kind of did it for me because I felt so afraid, and I knew this isn't okay. I don't want to keep running away from things that I'm afraid of in life. And confidence, I think, is a lot like that. And in fact, confidence is not some vague, abstract notion. It is a reality that we face in every aspect of our lives. And so it would be disingenuous for me to say, here's how you be confident as a writer, but there's no crossover with, your personal relationships or working relationships or whatever. It's all connected, which is to say that if you're insecure and not confident in one area of life, it's going to show up in another area. And I knew this to be true, and which is why I knew that I couldn't, be one person, with my writing and in my personal life or something, and then somebody else, when it comes to going to concerts or interacting with strangers. And I knew I wanted to be a more confident person, but for the longest time, I waited for confidence to come instead of acting confident and trusting that would beget more confidence. And so what I've realized, frankly, is that if you want to be more confident, you kind of have to fake it. You kind of have to act the way that you want to feel, trusting that the feelings will come. And the interesting thing about it is it often works, and people who seem confident often are not. But when you act a certain way, people tend to treat you that way. And this is what happened with this, 6'2", 35-year-old bully. I acted confident, and he clearly, if he knew the situation, he had the upper hand, he was in control, but I acted with confidence, and he kind of submitted to it. And what's interesting about it is you're not really faking anybody but yourself. You're faking yourself out so that you can be more confident. And when you do that, people acknowledge it, and mysteriously, the confidence in you grows, so that the next time you face that situation, you go, I got this. I can do this. I love the biblical story of David where he's facing the giant Goliath, and he's this little kid, and Goliath is this huge giant who's a warrior, and everybody doubts David's ability to slay the giant. And yet David doesn't doubt his ability because he has previous experience. People haven't seen it, but he knows what he's capable of. And he says, did I not kill the bear? Did I not kill the lion? He's been a shepherd guarding his flock for how many years as a teenage boy, and he knows how to deal with enemies. He knows how to fight off people or creatures that are wanting to attack the things that he cares about. And Goliath is just a really big bear to him. And so, there's something about having that experience that leads to, more confident experiences. So what happens when you don't have those experiences, as I did not have? You got to find them. You got to fake your way into it to do something that will allow you to face fear more confidently in the future. And what happens is even when you muster whatever strength, whatever courage, whatever confidence you have, and you face an enemy, and they don't back down, you don't slay the giant, they do end up, punching you in the face or yelling back at you. It doesn't matter, because once you've stepped up and faced them, you've won. You can't control the results, but you can control the battle within. And something that I've learned about bullies, because it's something that I've, dealt with for most of my life, especially as a kid, as a short, chubby, non-athletic kid who, still wanted to grow his hair out and sometimes was mistaken as a girl. I had to deal with bullies. And what I have realized is that the bullies, the biggest bullies that you face are not the ones in front of you. They're the ones in your mind. And every time I faced a bully, they've backed down. And I'm not saying that happens all the time, but what I am saying is I tend to make this enemy, this giant, this bully, this fearsome figure, whether it is a person or not, I tend to make it bigger in my mind than it actually is in front of me. And so when we face those things, we're actually training ourselves to see things as they are, not as we fear them to be.
And won't you roll the dice so I can know which way I should go?
Thank you for listening to this Q&A episode of The Portfolio Life with Jeff Goins. You are welcome to submit your question to Jeff by going to facebook.com/GoinsWriter. Your question may end up on a future episode of The Portfolio Life. You're also welcome to visit Jeff's website, GoinsWriter.com, where you can learn more about writing, marketing, creative business ideas, and making a difference in the world. Thanks again for listening to the show.
If we get up and if we do the work every day, just a little bit, two things will happen. One, we will make ourselves available to any inspiration that wants to come. And second,